Okay, so I was just talking about nationalism, the complexity of it, and I mentioned kind of briefly at the end. What about Jews and so-called gypsies, or they're now more politically correct called Roma people? Okay, here's what ends up happening. People start having this consciousness, this national consciousness that, hey, we as a particular linguist group, a particular group of a particular religion and language group, have a shared heritage, and we form a nation. And we as this people have a right to create our own nation under our own form of political control, to have our own nation state, that we have a right to self-determination, to control our own destiny. Okay? And um, you know, this most historians have been doing a lot of studies on nationalism and recognize that it is a kind of an imagination. An imagination, in other words, it's a concept that you have to buy into. Think about this. Alaskans and Hawaiians in America, the United States of America. People in Hawaii live closer geographically to Japan, where Pearl Harbor got hit. I remember that, World War II. Okay, then Hawaii is to the United States. It's a colony that we took from the Hawaiians. We displaced the Queen, and we forcibly annexed the country at the behest of plantation owners. Do you know about that? That's a whole other topic, right? Okay, so we grabbed Hawaii and made that a part of the United States of America. As we mentioned, we bought Alaska, that used to be part of Russia, and Alaska is in what essentially is now Canada, right? But it's a part of the United States. And people in Alaska, I have relatives that are there, are ultra-nationalists, United States of America. And they're not even on our soil. They're on the continent's soil, but they're far off, right? I mean, they could almost be in another country. Actually, they are in another country, okay? Hawaii is an island far away. What is this? How are these people Americans? How are they? What? But they feel like it, don't they? You talk to them, they are. I'm not saying that they aren't. I'm not even demoting this, but I'm saying think about this. This is a concept. It's not even geographical, actually, is my whole point. Okay? So nationalism is a very interesting and complex set of concepts. And it's a concept. And it complicates things because what is an American nationalism? American nationalism is even more complicated because everybody has come here as immigrants, but they've defined themselves as Americans. But what is being an American? What's Americanism? How do you properly define that? And it's a little bit more complicated than having, let's say, an Iranian nationalism, where you know that you've had an actual Persia/Iran for over 1,000 years. That's different. For Koreans, they have towns that have been around since like the time of Jesus. You can kind of see how nationalism there kind of works. American nationalism is a little bit more complicated, but no less potent, no less forceful, no less a part of our own identity. Now, what you can see later on, and we're going to talk about, is how, when Hitler attacks the Jews, many of the Jews lived in Germany. They were German. They lived in Germany for a long time, but they weren't Germans. And if a German state's supposed to be where there's Germans, then people who aren't German, of Germanic stock, who claim going back to the time period of the Romans to be the people that the Romans were writing about in Tacitus' writings, Germania, and so on, then you're like a parasite that's been there. You are this kind of entity that blotches up the picture. If you look at a lot of nationalist art, it would just be a picture of a landscape, a white woman in a white dress in a tree in a pond. And how is that nationalist? Because she's as natural to the landscape as the tree. Sweden is for Swedes. Now you put a black African there, you put a Jewish person there. Whoa, 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 whoa. What's going on? Right? It's like in their mind, it displaces things. And henceforth, wars, ethnic cleansing, purges, racism, blah, 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 blah. These things start to come up out of that. That's another topic, but that's some of the complexities that are going to occur out of this. Okay? Now, here's a very famous and powerful picture of a romantic, of romanticism, the epitome of man looking into nature, all-powerful nature, and contemplative man. So, to switch over to talk about culture and ideology, we have the scientific rationalism that occurred where the belief in the power of human reason, a positive view about the world. Comte had this whole philosophy on positivism. By the way, the Brazilian flag, take a look at it, research it, see what's on it, and see how that relates to Comte and positivism. Get back to me on that if you're interested. But he had this idea, kind of like Marx, right? But a more optimistic view in many respects. Okay, almost a kind of religious concept of history, but a different type, its own kind of religion. And then you had Romanticism. Romanticism appealed to the passions. It was a reaction against all of this. So the scientific industrial revolution, and it's a different reaction than even the socialists per se. Although you could be a socialist romantic, you could even be a communist romantic, sort of, but not. I mean, in a sense, communism's still looking forward. Socialism isn't against the future of modernization. It wants to have a social reaction to it that empowers the people who seem to be displaced or not empowered by industrialization. Okay? But romantics see something in nature, something really bad, negative about a lot of what's going on. Okay? And they are against the idea of the classic, this rigid classical world where things are intellectualized, the idea of the Enlightenment and what the mind can do in this mechanical universe that we see talked about. Oh, no. They're not into that. They're into like how you feel, about how you act, about how you make love, and their art should reflect that. And many of them are very dysfunctional according to our own standards of human behavior. Very reckless is the right word. Okay, but that's something that should be seen as like valuable in their mind. Now there's this other side, and we're talking about an association with nationalism, what I call romantic nationalism. And it goes back to that painting that I was talking to you about, that hypothetical painting of a landscape with a woman, and it seems like nothing. I have a book of Swedish nationalism and Nordic imagination. Kind of boring art, actually, in the sense that you'd say, what's nationalistic about this? No, it's this idea that there is this organic relationship between certain ethnic groups and the land. And it's going to emerge quite dark. The dark side of this is it's going to emerge into fascism, essentially. Fascism, Mussolini and Hitler's ideas are going to emerge out of romanticism and nationalism. And in part a response also to trying to address the inequality of their own society. They're going to be anti-socialist and anti-communist, but Hitler's going to be called a national socialist. He's going to talk about national socialism, and at the same time, if you read Mein Kampf, he accuses all socialists of being Jews. So Hitler's relationship to socialism and the fact that the Nazis are called national socialists and they're anti-socialist and anti-communist is a little bit complicated, which we'll get to at another time. But that's romanticism in a nutshell. I'm going to show you a documentary now. I'm going to leave for you on romanticism that I think really helps reflect also this response to industrialization. It's a great documentary. I like the full series of it. I've watched it several times. But in any case, I'm gonna have you watch that, and then I'm going to just briefly talk about these revolts that take place. These are very important, but again, in a general survey course, I prefer to talk about things that will stick in your brain. These are much more complicated things that are owed much more time to be devoted to, but we start seeing a lot of these ideas in action, and we see a lot of what liberalism and nationalism and socialism and later communism of all these kind of stripes are going to mean an actual political reality. Okay, so I'm going to end here. I'm going to leave this documentary, and then I will briefly talk about this before we move on to the next chapter.